Hey everybody and welcome to the Anfield Eye. My name is Mal and I want to talk about all things Alexander Isak at Newcastle, currently a Newcastle player, and his proposed move to Liverpool Football Club. Liverpool might be able to pull off one of the most shocking transfers of the summer, and it's got rival fans panicking. Alexander Isak, Newcastle's star striker, is being linked with a move to Anfield. And if this happens, it could completely reshape our attack. But how serious are the rumours? What does it mean for Hugo Ekitike, Salah and Gapco? And could this be the final piece in Arne Slot's master plan? Stick around because we're diving deep into the whispers, the tactics and the chaos this move could unleash. Now, unless you've been living on Mars or somewhere, we know that Alexander Isak put out a statement a few days ago. And in the statement he read, "I'm proud to be recognised by my fellow professionals with a place in the PFA Premier League team of this season. First and foremost, I want to thank my teammates and everyone at Newcastle United who has supported me along the way. I'm not at the ceremony tonight. With everything going on, it didn't feel right to be there. I've kept quiet for a long time while others have spoken. That silence has allowed people to push their own version of events, even though they know it doesn't reflect what really was said and agreed behind closed doors. The reality is that promises were made, and the club has known my position for a long time. To now act as these issues are only emerging is misleading. When promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship can't continue. That's where things are for me right now, and why change is the best interest of everyone, not just myself. Alexander Isak." So, guys, ladies and gentlemen, from that statement, you can tell that Newcastle had a verbal agreement with Alexander Isak at the end of last season. Alexander Isak was made aware that he would be allowed to leave Newcastle, and now all of a sudden he's not managed to get his transfer over the line to Liverpool, and is a very, very disillusioned and frustrated player at Newcastle. He was hoping that the transfer to Liverpool would have been wrapped up by now. There is only a week left to the transfer. So, what does Twitterverse say about the transfer and the current situation of Alexander Isak? Well, the Anfield paper is reporting that Alexander Isak is set to attend Liverpool versus Newcastle at St James's Park on Monday, but it's unclear where he will be sitting. If I was Alexander Isak, I'd be very, very brave to go to St James's Park on Monday, but if I do go, I'd probably be booking one of the wonderful lounges that Newcastle have at St James's Park, and be out of sight. Now, what does Alexander Isak's peer, the greatest Swedish footballer who ever lived, what does he say about Alexander Isak's transfer to Liverpool? Well, "I spoke to him several times over the summer, encouraging him to make the next step in his career. Liverpool is the perfect fit for him." So, come on, the greatest player in Sweden football history is telling Alexander Isak, just go, you need to join a bigger club. Why are you still at Newcastle and you haven't got your transfer to Liverpool? Ian Doyle, a very, very reputable reporter. "It seems some clubs are particularly great at selling players, and LFC are now having to deal with that. They're not particularly good at selling players. That is Newcastle United. Newcastle United haven't covered themselves in a lot of glory, unfortunately, in the summer transfer window. They've tried to buy a number of players. They haven't got those signatures over the line. And unfortunately, Alexander Isak is just sitting in a bus shelter waiting to get his move." Ian Doyle on Alexander Isak. "Isak looks like he will come to Anfield sooner rather than later, and there have certainly been signs of Newcastle resolve weakening in recent days. Might a 130 million deal sort it? It wouldn't be a shock." I think hopefully if Newcastle will get to a point where they realise that Isak will not play for the first team, and he will not want to be on at St James's Park representing Newcastle. So let's just cash in and sell Alexander Isak to Liverpool. Moby, Alexander Isak himself has said, has let the club known he wanted to leave for a long time. Promises were broken and the relationship cannot continue. It's time to free Isak. The Anfield buzz, every club has a contingency plan, but there is a nagging suspicion Liverpool are intent on signing Alexander Isak and won't settle for anyone else. Anfield Lounge, Troy Deeney has advised Alexander Isak to ruin training sessions to force a move. In private, my agent said to me, you're going to have to kick up a fuss here. You're going back to training and you'll do all of the running, but as soon as a ball is involved, you're going to have to ruin sessions. You're going to have to kick the ball away, but importantly, you can't let anyone on the outside know what's going on. Now, if he does that, if Alexander Isak starts ruining training sessions, Newcastle are well within their rights to fine Alexander Isak because he is still a Newcastle player. And if a Liverpool player did that in training, I would expect the management and the staff to come hard on that player. The Anfield Express promised a new contract by his club, promised he could leave by his club, lied to by his club, promises broken by his club, scapegoated by his club. Club have lied to the fans. Fans have believed it. This is what happens when a small club try and be a big club. LFC do the right thing and free Isak, let him play for a big club. Now, I've got a problem with this statement because I don't actually think that the club, Newcastle United, have actually scapegoated Alexander Isak. I think they behaved quite respectfully here and professionally, and I don't agree with that statement. This is what happens when a small club try to be a big club, because I believe Newcastle United are a big club. They're in the Champions League, they've got history, and they may not be as big as Liverpool Football Club, but they are a big club nonetheless. Anfield Forge, do Liverpool sign Alexander Isak this transfer window? Let me know in your comments below. I am very interested to hear your views. Anything Liverpool? Ian Doyle again, should Isak not move to Liverpool before the deadline? It may be that the Reds try again in the new year and continue for the first half of the season with their current attacking options. Don't be surprised if there is no plan B. Now, I was speaking about this to a colleague yesterday, and I also suggested this might be true. If the Alexander Isak transfer does not materialize this summer transfer window, Liverpool will just come in January and do what they did with Virgil van Dijk when he was playing at Southampton, and they will get the Alexander Isak transfer done in January. If Newcastle secure a replacement, a 130 million bid could be enough to unlock Alexander Isak's move to Liverpool. I do agree with that. I just think I think Newcastle United really need to move in the transfer market. Now, this is something that I really respect Michael Owen for coming out with a statement. Michael Owen said, I'm not going to sit here and criticize Isak. 9 times out of 10, it's normally a club forcing a player and nobody's bothered. Nobody says anything about kids in schools or families that have settled in the area. And then Michael Owen went on to say, all of these ex-players who are criticizing Alexander Isak, they would have been doing exactly the same. Michael Owen defends Alexander Isak. I'm not going to sit here and criticize Isak. 9 times out of 10, it's normally a club forcing a player out and nobody is bothered. If you look at Garnacho at Manchester United, if you look at Rasmus Højlund at Manchester United, these players have been told by the club, we don't want you. Nobody's batting an eyelid, absolutely nobody. The fans, all right, these players are not of the caliber of Manchester United, I totally agree. But clubs can do that to players. But when a player does that to a club and says to a club, I don't want to play with you anymore, that player gets absolutely hammered by social media and the fans. Alexander Isak expected serious investment in the Newcastle squad and infrastructure in order for the club to compete at the top. But this, like a new contract and a pay rise after the ownership change, never materialised. Now, I think Newcastle fans won't disagree with that. Alexander Isak wanted Newcastle to, when they qualified for the Champions League, to step up a level, and Newcastle have failed to do that. LFC transfer room. Me and Alex had conversations toward the end of the season. Yes, I am not going to sit here and deny that. Yes, we had discussions about his future. That was Eddie Howe's press conference 2 days ago. I'll come back to that point in a moment. Alexander Isak's relationship with Newcastle is completely broken. Not only was he promised a pay rise which was not given, but he expected serious investment in the squad and infrastructure to compete at the top. But those plans never materialized. So, Newcastle fans, can you blame Alexander Isak? Why are you not blaming Newcastle United and the board? David Okop on August the 22nd said Eddie Howe on whether Alexander Isak told him he wanted to leave before the end of the season. Me and Alex had conversations towards the end of the season. Yes, I'm not going to sit here and deny that. Yes, we had discussions about his future. Now, Eddie Howe's a very stand-up guy. He's a very good manager. And for him to actually come out in a press conference, he could have thrown Alexander Isak under the bus and said, no conversations took place. Isak's making all of this up. His agent's wrong. Isak is wrong. And he could have turned the fans against Isak even more. But he didn't. Eddie Howe turned around and said he did have conversations with Alexander Isak, but he wasn't going to tell what those conversations were about. Well, me and you know that those conversations were about Alexander Isak saying he wanted to leave and Eddie Howe saying, okay, fine, let us get your replacements and you can leave. Alexander Isak, in his statement, when promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship can't continue. That's where things are for me right now, and why change is in the best interest of everyone, not just myself. Coming back to that statement from Eddie Howe, me and Alex had conversations towards the end of the season, and then Isak is saying when promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship can't continue. I'll be putting two and two together here, ladies and gentlemen. It looks pretty obvious what has happened and why Alexander Isak doesn't want to play for Newcastle anymore. Craig Howe, a very reputable Newcastle reporter. Liverpool are entitled to sign a player they liked and had tracked. Of course, a very good player, but yes, had Newcastle signed Ekitike, I think Isak to Liverpool would have happened. Well, he's kind of putting the ball in Liverpool's court and saying you shouldn't have gone for Ekitike. But then Liverpool did go for Pedro, and Chelsea bought him, and they went for Sesko, and Sesko chose to go to Manchester United. So it's not all Liverpool's fault. Craig Hope again. Eddie Howe has not spoken to Alexander Isak since his bombshell statement. Newcastle United Football Club boss admits club are in a lose-lose situation to a degree, given the striker will either leave or stay against his wishes. Craig Hope again. Newcastle knew coming out of last season that Alexander Isak wanted to go. It is why they had pursued Pedro, Delap, Ekitike, Sesko, players who may have facilitated Isak's sale. Eddie Howe was asked today about Isak telling him he wanted to leave in May, and this is what he said. Me and Alex had conversations towards the end of last season. Yes, that is true. Now, Dave Okop, Eddie Howe and Alexander Isak. He won't be part of the squad this weekend. The club has had to act in the best interest of Newcastle. It will do that in every situation. It looks like it's coming to an end, or it will come to an end pretty quickly. So, there we go. On Alexander Isak, Eddie Howe said, it was a sad moment. My preference in these things is that these things do not happen in public. They are better dealt with behind closed doors, but needs must. The club has spoken, and justifiably so in that moment. He contacted us. His contracted to us. He's our player. My wish is that he would be playing on Monday. He won't. That's regrettable, but 100% I want him back in a Newcastle shirt. Well, what Eddie Howe wants and what Alexander Isak want are two very different things. And finally, David Okop. As expected, Alexander Isak has not taken part in Newcastle's training session ahead of the Liverpool fixture on Monday. I think Alexander Isak has really dug his heels in the ground, and Newcastle United are at a very, very difficult situation where they have a player on their books that doesn't want to play for Newcastle anymore. But Newcastle have time on their side. Alexander Isak is running out of time. Liverpool Football Club are running out of time. There is only 1 week left for the summer before the summer transfer window closes. Let me know your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Will Alexander Isak finally move to Liverpool Football Club in this summer transfer window, or will it be in January? Either way, it looks like Alexander Isak will not play for Newcastle United ever again. Thank you, everybody. Please like and subscribe. See you in the next video.